before I have to go in.
Do you have children, Keone?
No, I don't have children.
Okay. You know what? In this case, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I had 5, and 4 of them have never forgiven me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, but you're a smart man and you're handling this very well. If I may offer just a little bit of advice.
Please.
The library and the chapel are the 2 very best places to work. The library and the chapel. Or if you're lucky and they're a little bit overcrowded, you can get a no-show job. You're only going to make about 10 cents a month as your salary. I think I made 16 cents a month, but you also don't have to do any work. With that said, what kept me busy, and this is the thing, is you're going to have to keep yourself busy. Sure, there's a day room with 6 TVs or 4 TVs or whatever it happens to have. You can sit and watch TV all day long. Read as much as you can. Write a memoir. I did. That ended up winning 2 literary awards. But write, answer letters, read as voraciously as you can. It helps pass the time much more quickly.
Yeah, that's exactly my plan. I love reading anyway.
Good.
And over the last decade, I've been working on Samurai so much that I haven't got to read many things. So I'm going to have plenty of time. Everyone who I've talked to who's been to prison says it's really the boredom that gets you.
It's the boredom.
Yeah.
Truly, it's the boredom. I was there for 23 months. And I read more than 125 books. Oh, and for our viewers who are interested, if you're sending books to somebody in the federal prison system, you're allowed to send paperbacks. Hardbacks have to come directly from the publisher or from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. They can't come from an individual. People were very generous with me. I got more books than I knew what to do with.
Amazing.
So yeah, get yourself into a routine, read, write, and it'll pass quickly.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining us. This was, I'm sorry we even had to do something like this, Keone. Keone Rodriguez is the co-creator, the co-founder of Samurai Wallet. And we were very, very happy to have him today. Thanks so much for being with us, and very, very best of luck. Sure. First, I think we owe
viewers a definition of terrorism. The generally agreed upon definition of terrorism is the act of carrying out violence in the civilian population for the purpose of creating terror for a political purpose. So terrorism, supporting national liberation organizations, is not an act of terrorism. It's just not. Whether we disagree with that or not is a separate issue, but it's just not an act of terrorism. I would add that there are close U.S. allies, you named Saudi Arabia, for example, that if we were to hold this... To tell you the truth, I don't prepare, ever. I figure that if I don't know this stuff by now, I'm never going to know it. And it's not really my CIA training that got me prepared for it. It was Mr. Scarvel in 10th grade speech class. I had this teacher, Mr. Scarvel. He was a childhood friend of my father's, and he really took a liking to me. Mr. Scarvel and my dad, when they were 9 years old, they went squirrel hunting outside of Farrell, Pennsylvania. And Mr. Scarvel was holding the shotgun, and he tripped over the root of a tree. And when he fell, the gun went off and shot him in the eye, and it took his eye completely out. My father, at the age of 9, picked him up and carried him to the nearest house. And they didn't save the eye, but they got him to a hospital. And so Mr. Scarvel always really liked me. And he told me in 10th grade that I had a knack for extemporaneous speaking. In 11th grade, then, he strongly suggested that I join the debate team in high school. So I did, and found that really it was extemporaneous speaking rather than debate that I was particularly good at. And so to be able to speak off the cuff, well, none of that filler stuff. Although I do say, too much. No filler stuff. You have to read absolutely everything and then formulate an idea, a policy in your head so that you can go with it. And so when you're called upon to come out with it, you can just come out with it. If somebody says to me, John, what's your idea about Gaza? I come out with my idea about Gaza. John, what do you think about what's happening between the Trump administration and the Mexican cartels? You come out with it. So there's no real preparation when the talk or the interview is about me or about my case. I don't prepare, for example, when I have to go on the Danny Jones show or the Joe Rogan Experience or Tucker Carlson. Like I said, I just figure if I don't know it by now, I'm never going to know it.
And his face got all red, and he balled up his fists, and he set a stance. And I remember specifically thinking, damn it, I went too far this time.
All right.
So I put up my hands to protect myself from the inevitable blow. And he goes, my penis is bigger than yours. In August of 2000, I start training these Middle Eastern services, and then I'm handling a couple of sensitive cases. I got a call in the spring of 2001 from a buddy of mine who was a station chief in the Middle East, and he says to me, hey, could you do me a favor? And I said, of course. He goes, we've recruited a double agent who doesn't know that we know he's a double agent, working for one of our greatest enemies on the planet. He's been instructed to insist that he meets only with me, the chief. And I said, okay. And he says, it's too dangerous for me to meet this guy. I have to live here. Can you come out here every month and pretend to be me and handle this guy. I said, oh, that sounds like fun. I said, I'm bored.
They don't know what he looks like?
No, they don't know what he looks
Okay.
like. They were trying to draw him out. Like they know that there's a station chief, a CIA station chief somewhere in the embassy. They don't know who among these, 20 people is the station chief. So
Did he want you to wear a T-shirt that had a big target?
that's kind of what it comes down to.
That doesn't sound exciting at all.
No, it's exciting. I was an adrenaline junkie. I sitting in a cubicle in headquarters like this, it's not for me.
Yeah.
So,
I'll pick that over. Can you please pretend to be someone that these guys definitely are trying to kill and want to kill?
So I fly out, I meet with a guy, and I said to him in our very first meeting, I said, listen, the fact that we're meeting is dangerous. Not for me. If we get caught, I'm going to get thrown out, and I don't care. If you get caught, you're going to get arrested because you're working for the Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to go over something called a surveillance detection route. And I explained to him what it was. You drive here, you make a stop, you buy an apple, you go over here and you buy a newspaper, you go over there and pick up your dry cleaning. So I laid out a map of the city and I gave him a sample of, what you do.
You've spoken extensively about Israel as an intelligence threat to the U.S., but I haven't heard you say much about Cuba in the interviews and clips I've watched. I'm Bolivian, and in Latin America, Cuban intelligence is often seen as the most effective service in the region. How is Cuban intelligence regarded inside the CIA? Was it considered especially capable? Any stories that illustrate why it earned that reputation? I'm going to go one farther. Carlos, the Cuban intelligence
Service is one of the best on the planet. I can tell you that of all the Cubans ever recruited by the CIA,
literally every one of them turned out to be a double agent working for the Cuban intelligence service. They are brilliant. They're so good at what they do, but we don't hear about them because they are defensive in nature. Their job is to protect Cuba. They're not plotting, invasions of Iran or invasions of Iraq or invasions of Afghanistan or military operations in Somalia
or Libya or Syria. They're just focused on protecting Cuba. And they're smart and they're accomplished and they were trained by the KGB.
And they're just really, really good at what they do. Especially capable is the term you used. Absolutely. Was a third baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. And so Bruce is a huge baseball fan. I'm a big baseball fan. Bruce has season tickets to the Washington Nationals. And it turns out that Thomas Massie is also a big baseball fan. Well, because Massie is a libertarian Republican and Bruce is a libertarian Republican, Massie asks Bruce to write most of the bills that Massie ends up sponsoring in the House of Representatives. So we invite him to a baseball game. And he's come to about a half a dozen with us, and we hang out. And he is a lovely guy. He's a nice guy. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like his position on the issues. But he's one of those rare people who really is in Washington because he thinks he can make the country better. So I trust him and I like him, even if I don't always agree with him. Now, he said that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, assigns what he called a babysitter to every member of Congress. That is absolutely true. And I know because I met many of them when I was working on Capitol Hill, not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger and for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. And so Bruce is a huge baseball fan. I'm a big baseball fan. Bruce has season tickets to the Washington Nationals. And it turns out that Thomas Massie is also a big baseball fan. Well, because Massie is a libertarian Republican and Bruce is a libertarian Republican, Massie asks Bruce to write most of the bills that Massie ends up sponsoring in the House of Representatives. So we invite him to a baseball game. And he's come to about a half a dozen with us, and we hang out. And he is a lovely guy. He's a nice guy. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like his position on the issues. But he's one of those rare people who really is in Washington because he thinks he can make the country better. So I trust him and I like him, even if I don't always agree with him. Now, he said that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, assigns what he called a babysitter to every member of Congress. That is absolutely true. And I know because I met many of them when I was working on Capitol Hill, not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger, not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger and I was working for Representative Joseph P. Coulter, a Democrat of Pennsylvania. AIPAC wants to make sure that the members of Congress that they are babysitting vote 100% down the line for Israel. And if they don't, they're going to get a smack in the face. And if they continue to not vote in support of Israel, they're going to be primaried. And they will defeat you because they will spend millions and millions of dollars to defeat you. And they'll find a pro-Israel stooge to take your job and take your place and do exactly as they're told to do. So I thought Massie was very gutsy to come out and say this in public. It's one of those things that nobody wants to admit to. Now, the Epstein file switch up, same idea. You can draw your own conclusions. The Jonathan Pollard, Miriam Adelson thing made me so angry I actually lost sleep over it. I can get into this in a standalone episode, but Jonathan Pollard is a traitor. He's a traitor who should have. It's one of those things that nobody wants to admit to. Now, the Epstein file switch up, same idea. You can draw your own conclusions. The Jonathan Pollard, Miriam Adelson thing made me so angry I actually lost sleep over it. I can get into this in a standalone episode, but Jonathan Pollard is a traitor. He's a traitor who should have been executed. Jonathan Pollard was working for Navy intelligence in the 1980s, and in I don't even know how he was caught, but he was caught spying for Israel. He had been providing Israel with top secret, not just secret, top secret documents from Navy intelligence, and they were all about Soviet and American naval maneuvers. He sent these documents, by some accounts, 10,000 or 15,000 pages of top secret documents, sent them to the Israeli Mossad through his handler here in the United States. So when the Israelis say they don't spy on the United States, they're lying. But the Israelis then traded the documents to the KGB in exchange for the Russians allowing some Russian Jews to emigrate to Israel. In exchange for the Russians allowing some Russian Jews to emigrate to Israel. Pollard was caught. He was convicted of espionage, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He did every day of the 30 years. But when he got out, Miriam Adelson sent her private jet to take him to Israel. He was met at the airport by Benjamin Netanyahu, who bestowed upon him Israeli citizenship. Pollard got off the private jet and kissed the ground where Netanyahu was standing. This is all on YouTube. You can see it, and there are pictures of it. All you have to do is Google it. But in the meantime, Pollard has said in press interviews in Israel that he advocates Israel using nuclear weapons against the United States if the U.S. doesn't do just as Israel commands it to do. And he has urged all American Jews who have security clearances to please spy for Israel. And now he's running for the Knesset. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, he was welcomed into the American embassy for a secret meeting with our evangelical Christian ambassador, the former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. By all accounts, the CIA station chief practically exploded in rage, and three separate State Department officers report CIA station chief practically exploded in rage, and three separate State Department officers reported the meeting back to the State Department. To have a traitor welcomed into the State Department is so beyond the pale. I can't even imagine what in the world was going through Mike Huckabee's mind. Anyway, that's worth a longer conversation. Thanks for bringing it up. But Thomas Massie is right on point. This is very dangerous for a foreign country to control American foreign policy or American legislation like AIPAC does, Capitol Hill. Not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger and I was working for Representative Joseph P. Coulter, a Democrat of Pennsylvania. AIPAC wants to make sure that the members of Congress that they are babysitting vote 100% down the line for Israel. And if they don't, they're going to get a smack in the face. And if they continue to not vote in support of Israel, they're going to be primaried. And they will defeat you because they will spend millions and millions of dollars to defeat you. And they'll find a pro-Israel stooge to take your job and take your place and do exactly as they're told to do. So I thought Massie was very gutsy to come out and say this in public. It's one of those things that nobody wants to admit to. Now, the Epstein file switch up, same idea. You can draw your own conclusions. The Jonathan Pollard, Miriam Adelson thing made me so angry I actually lost sleep over it. I can get into this in a standalone episode, but Jonathan Pollard is a traitor. He's a traitor who should have been a third baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. And so Bruce is a huge baseball fan. I'm a big baseball fan. Bruce has season tickets to the Washington Nationals. And it turns out that Thomas Massie is also a big baseball fan. Well, because Massie is a libertarian Republican and Bruce is a libertarian Republican, Massie asks Bruce to write most of the bills that Massie ends up sponsoring in the House of Representatives. So we invite him to a baseball game. And he's come to about a half a dozen with us, and we hang out. And he is a lovely guy. He's a nice guy. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like his position on the issues. But he's one of those rare people who really is in Washington because he thinks he can make the country better. So I trust him and I like him, even if I don't always agree with him. Now, he said that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, assigns what he called a babysitter to every member of Congress. That is absolutely true. And I know because I met many of them when I was working on Capitol Hill, not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger. Says, John, great video as always. Thank you. I love you interviewing other agents from other countries. I've always wondered, what was your typical loadout while in the field? Firearms, cash, etc. That's a good question. And I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. It actually depends on the day. When I was assigned in Athens, I kept a fully loaded
9mm semi-automatic handgun in a tearaway fanny pack on my waist and a fully loaded Smith & Wesson 38 snub-nose revolver on my ankle. Kept a buck knife in my back pocket just in case things turned to shit. And I also kept 2 extra fully loaded magazines in my fanny pack. So I had 47, it was either 47 or 49
rounds of ammunition for the 9mm, another 6 bullets in my 38 and my knife, and hoped for the best. In Pakistan, I kept just a 9mm and only with the 1 magazine, kept it in a holster on my waist. So it was an extended mag. So I had
17 rounds in that. And honest to God, I'm being completely serious in saying this. I would pray to God every morning that I didn't have to pull it out and shoot somebody that day. That's the kind of place Pakistan was. But anyway, cash is another good question. And the answer is that also depended on the day. If I was going to do a surveillance detection route and to meet with a source, I would have to have the source's monthly pay plus expenses. And I would have to have money for myself for my surveillance detection routes. So on a normal day, I would have between, say, $2,000 and $5,000 in cash on me. Mind you, this is 25 years ago, so it would be a lot more now. And intelligence is a cash business. If I was doing an operation, I've said in podcasts that a colleague of mine and I requisitioned a van from the embassy motor pool in Islamabad when we were going down to Faisalabad to do the Abu Zubaydah raids, and we had $2 million in cash in 2 duffel bags. So depends on the day, depends on the op. It changes wildly. I may have told you I had dinner a couple of weekends ago with Sean Penn. He invited me to go over to his house in Malibu. I flew out to LA and we had a lovely, lovely dinner. And he said that he had seen an advanced cut of the movie. It's being edited right now. It's almost done, and they're laying the soundtrack over things right now. It should be done in the next month or two. And then it's going to go to the film festivals, and then it's going to go onto one of the streaming services. It's called Below World's End. So he said that he had seen a rough cut of the movie. And I said, oh my God, I just saw a rough cut of the movie. I said, the movie was surprisingly excellent. Like, it was excellent. My partner watched it with me, and she was bawling through the movie at the end. She was bawling. And I'm looking at her like, seriously? And she said, this is a beautiful movie. So he said, I really loved the movie. He said, I made some recommendations around editing. And I said, I was terrible. I was stiff and unconvincing. But my God, everybody else in the movie was brilliant. Like, totally convincing. And Sean said, no, you were good. And I said, no, it's the first time I ever acted in anything. I was really not good. And he said, oh no. He said, his words, you were bold and mercurial. You're actually a good actor. I said, geez, thank you. He said, don't you see it? You acted every single day of your career. You think that that's your personality, and it's not. You're acting, and you don't even realize.
He was complimenting me. I took it as a compliment. I might have thought that was my personality, but he was complimenting me. And I realized it's just fun. I would like to do it as a hobby. So in the meantime, I got a good friend, who is a 4-time Emmy-winning producer of Game of Thrones. And I called him, and I said, Vince, I know that you have a movie greenlit, and you have a TV series greenlit. And I said, buddy, to qualify for the SAG health insurance, which is literally the best health insurance in America, I need to only make $8,000 more in the next 12 months. And he said, you want a speaking role? And I said, yeah, even if it's just somebody comes up to my character and says,
excuse me, where's the men's room? I say, it's down the hall on the right. Done. I get my health insurance. Well, some of you might know I'm on Cameo right now. I've been on Cameo for the last month. And it turns out that there's an agreement between Cameo and SAG-AFTRA that all of the money that you make on Cameo is credited as acting income. So all of a sudden, John is in the top 5% of all actors in America in terms of money made. It's nuts to think of, but I'm going to keep doing this. I think it's fun, and you can't make a living doing it, certainly, but it's my new hobby, that and astrophotography, which I'm also kind of good at. So my Harper N, thanks for that.
Are they letting, it seems like if you go on the internet, no one is on Israel's side. There's a few people, like Mark Levins and whoever.
And Ben Shapiro.
And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much
Patrick Bet-David, yeah. Who's not even Jewish.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and his whole panel of people that he put. I love how he does his podcast, and he has all of his co-hosts sit in these little like kindergarten desks next to him. He has this like giant like
I will say, a friend of mine who knows him warned me before I went on his show that Patrick can come out swinging. And I went on the show, and he was absolutely lovely to me, respectful. We had a terrific conversation, and we've actually stayed in touch, not all the time, but we've stayed in touch. He was perfectly lovely to me. We just disagree with each other on Israel strongly. But I'll add another thing too, if I can interrupt you for one more second. Piers Morgan. I'm on the Piers Morgan show all the time.
I'm a fan of all of your debates on Piers Morgan. Thank you. Especially with the Dershowitz.
Yeah, Alan doesn't like me anymore. What? I know, right? Anyway, I'm cool with that. But Piers likes having me on. I was on again yesterday. He likes having me on because I don't interrupt people.
You know, I was raised to believe that was rude to interrupt somebody. So I try not to. And when I do interrupt, I apologize for interrupting. But anyway, it's like SmackDown on that show half the time. 3 or 4 appearances ago, I'm going to say this is probably like 6 or 8 months ago, Piers said to me, I was on this panel with Scott Horton, who is absolutely freaking brilliant.
Oh yeah, he's
I could just sit and listen to him talk all day long. The guy is so smart and so grounded. He and I were on what was supposed to be the pro-Palestinian side. And then
that's a lot of them binary.
Yeah. And then the other side was some former head of Mossad and some journalist.
This was yesterday?
No, this was 6 or 8 months ago. And then some journalist, I don't remember who it was. But these guys were just killing each other, interrupting each other. Like I expected that if they were in the same room, we were all remote, but if they'd been in the same room, they would have gotten up and we would have seen fisticuffs. One of my favorite words. So at the end,
Pierce says, John, you haven't said much. He said, do you believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization? And I said, well, I believe that it was created as an organization of national liberation. But in terms of October 7th, if you're attacking a civilian population for the purpose of instilling terror for a political goal, then yes, of course, Hamas is a terrorist organization. He said, do you believe October 7th was a terrorist attack? And I said, yes. Again, if you're attacking civilians at a music festival and you're just killing people and snatching them and taking them hostage, yes, of course, that's a terrorist attack. And he said, then what's your objection to the Israeli response? I said, Pierce, you can't have as your policy, kill everybody. Women, children, the sick, the elderly, bulldoze the hospitals, bulldoze the schools, the homes, the businesses. That is the very definition of a genocide. Like, has anybody here bothered to read the genocide law? That's the definition of a genocide. If your goal, and Donald Trump told us what the Israeli goal was, it was to push out all Palestinians and to develop the property. His words, it would be better than Monte Carlo. That is the very definition of ethnic cleansing. You can't do that. And then Pierce said, I think this is the first time on the show that we've all agreed on something. And then later he told me that it was that response that made him change his mind on Israel.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I was like, I get it. I get the Israeli frustration. I really do. People were slaughtered that day. It really was Israel's 9/11. I get it. But the response can't be 1,000 times more than what the Israelis got.
As good as Israel.
My lawyers got up and said, Your Honor, are you saying that a person can accidentally commit espionage? And she said, that's exactly what I'm saying. And then she says to me, Mr. Kiriakou, you either did it or you didn't do it. And I think you did it. And I think you need to talk about a plea. Judge Leonie Brinkema said that she was not going to respect precedent set in other federal district courts, that she was going to redefine espionage as, very simply, providing national defense information to any person not entitled to receive it. And my lawyer got up.
How do you determine who's not allowed to see it?
Who determines what national defense information is?
Right.
It's never been defined. The law doesn't even mention classified information because the classification system hadn't been invented yet when the law was passed in 1917. So my lawyers got up and said, Your Honor, are you saying that a person can accidentally commit espionage? And she said, that's exactly what I'm saying. And then she says to me, Mr. Kiriakou, you either did it or you didn't do it. And I think you did it. And I think you need to talk about a plea.
Well, that's not a good sign at all.
No.
Not with a death penalty, not with a death penalty on the table.
They offered me 45 years. I said, I'm not doing 45 minutes. So my lawyers are like, we're going to fight this. We're going to go to trial. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to make these motions. We blocked off 3 days for 150 motions. We go into court and she says, let me make this easy for everybody. I'm denying all 150 of these motions. Right? And they were to declassify 150 documents that I needed to defend myself.
It was in a case, yeah.
And she goes, plea, Mr. Kiriakou. Like, what kind of fair trial is that?
Yeah. She's already determined you're guilty.
Oh, yeah. So we went 10 months like that with this hanging over my head 45 years. And then after 10 months.
But you're out on bond.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are paid attorneys from you?
Oh boy, are they?
I mean,
11 of them.
This is what? Are they taking it on pro bono or you just?
Half of them were.
Okay.
The Washington Post called my attorneys legal titans. These were the guys who had represented Monica Lewinsky and Aldrich Ames and Attorney General John Mitchell during Watergate. And these guys are giants who are on the front page of the Post and the New York Times all the time.
But they've wiped you out financially.
Wiped me out.
Okay.
I gave them everything I had and ran up a bill of another $1,150,000. So 10 months pass with this hanging over my head like an anvil. And DOJ comes back and they said, take a plea to an espionage charge, 10 years. I said, absolutely not. That was on a Monday. On Wednesday, they said 8 years. And I said, I'm not doing it. And then on Friday, they came back and said, 5 years. We're not going any lower. I said, I'll go to trial. I'll go to trial and I'll testify on my own behalf. And I might accidentally talk about some of the hideous crimes against humanity and war crimes that I witnessed in 15 years at the CIA. Then they come back the next week. Well, first, my lead attorney, legendary figure named Plato Kacharis, he's dead now. But he said, I've been an attorney in this city for 52 years. And this is the first time I've seen them come down in their offers. Usually they offer you 10, you say no, the next offer is 15. Then the next offer is 20. I said, why are they coming down in time? And without missing a beat, he says, because they have a shit case and they know it's shit and that's why we're going to trial. I'm like, okay, let's go to trial. So they come back and they say, 3.5 years, best and final. Service hunt for chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons.
$50 million. I'll let Benji go. Say, come one step closer. Shoot me. Stop.
Yeah. There are elements of reality in that. Sometimes part of the job, especially in counterterrorism, is that you have to put yourself in dangerous positions like that. There was one situation where I was handling a double agent. He didn't know that I knew he was a double agent. And he didn't know that I knew that he had been instructed to shoot me in our final meeting. So we had prepared a team, just like you saw here in the clip, to protect me. It's not as sexy as this is, with a beautiful woman sitting there next to you, with a gun in your ribs to do you the favor of killing you. And the technology isn't on your contact lens. But the idea is correct. On realism, I'd give it like a 4 because the danger of that final meeting, sure, is accurate. It's a little cooler than it is in real life,
And the rest of it's just was a third baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s. And so Bruce is a huge baseball fan. I'm a big baseball fan. Bruce has season tickets to the Washington Nationals. And it turns out that Thomas Massey is also a big baseball fan. Well, because Massey is a libertarian Republican and Bruce is a libertarian Republican, Massey asks Bruce to write most of the bills that Massey ends up sponsoring in the House of Representatives. So we invite him to a baseball game. And he's come to about a half a dozen with us, and we hang out. And he is a lovely guy. He's a nice guy. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like his position on the issues. But he's one of those rare people who really is in Washington because he thinks he can make the country better. So I trust him and I like him, even if I don't always agree with him. Now, he said that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, assigns what he called a babysitter to every member of Congress. That is absolutely true. And I know because I met many of them when I was working on Capitol Hill, not just for John Kerry on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but in an earlier iteration when I was younger